Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, we are continuing our series of talks about how to amp up your manifestation ability, work with the law of attraction, and how to connect spiritually while doing so. Because I work in a form of spirituality that is psychology-informed spirituality, and it helps us be grounded in the 3D, in touch with our emotional structure and our emotional world, which we really have to have a good flow with in order to be able to work with the more spiritual concepts of manifestation, attraction, abundance, having our thoughts create our reality, feeling connected, and feeling guided. Last week's episode told you a little bit about how to do things like try and start connecting with your guide. I have one thing to add with that. One of the things that you want to do to set your intentions about meditation, and remember, meditation and mindfulness are essentially the same thing. If you do not like to meditate, and it can be very difficult in a world that keeps us on edge constantly, to learn to cultivate that form of connection, then what you can do is a form of mindfulness where you just tune into the focus of your five senses. I did a whole podcast on that, how to open up your third eye without meditation. But today's topic is actually cultivating resiliency. Resiliency is the thing that actually allows for constant growth and constant expansion of our abilities. And it really is the concept of like whatever knocks you down, you're a weeble, you dust yourself off, you get back up, you keep going. And that is basically the essence of success is contained in your ability to be resilient. Because things hardly ever go according to plan entirely. I've done years worth of work on trying to help people understand and free themselves from their trauma. And that, exists in a bulk of work in 2 years worth of podcasts that are both magical, spiritual, and psychological in order to try and connect people to the different realms within them that may need attention before they're able to manifest in a strong and a resilient manner in this particular reality. But that work all exists. And if you've done the work, you're healed. And what do you do when you're healed? How do you begin to take the power that you have cultivated, the health that you have pursued to amplify your work? And it is partially in the perspective that we take around what has happened to us. Now, before I continue with this, I have to do the housekeeping because if I put it at the top, y'all listen to it. My name is Elaine. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. That's the only way to book me. I have a YouTube channel, Cronecast at The Rising Moon, where the video versions of these podcasts go up. I have a Patreon where we do Spirit Guide weekly, Spirit Guide monthly. Occasionally I teach some tarot. It goes with the flow of what is needed at the time for my particular collective, and it's ever developing. All of these things will be linked in the description box or the episode notes. And I hope you're able to join me on some of these things because it's fun to form a greater collective. So one of the things that I've covered over and over again is that there are multitudes of answers for how to connect spiritually, and that nobody has the one answer. That your beliefs are going to be right for you, and so you may be drawn to something that works for a time, and then you're asked to move on and expand to something else, and you'll know when you're ready. And if you're not quite ready to do manifestation work because you're still suffering from depression, anxiety, heartbreak, heal that first. And be spiritually guided in the path of healing, and it will go more swiftly. But one of the things that helps with that is the concept of nothing's going to take me out. I am resilient. I am strong. I'm ever expanding. And the things that we tell ourselves are the reality that we are living. If you tell yourself, I'm going to be able to overcome anything that ever happened to me, that is a great perspective to take. And to remember that life happens to everybody. It's not handed out on merit. Even if you've had a difficult path, and I've covered the fact that, by fair measure, I did have a difficult path as a child, leading into a difficult adulthood, leading into the need to overcome a bunch of trauma. But that I don't feel unfortunate because of that. If anything, the opposite is true. I had a set of circumstances that insisted that I make good friends with who I am, my authentic self, find my own gifts, and follow my own path. And that everything that happened in my life was an opportunity for me to learn to do better. And one of the things to cultivate with trying to find resilience, which again is the ability to bounce back. You want it. Because no matter how much power you have, we live in a tremendously large reality. And you want to be able to remember that it's not about whether you were right or wrong or whether it was fair or any of that. It is about, what can I learn from the things that have happened in my life? Everything that is brought to us contains a lesson. Not everything is brought to us for a reason, because sometimes other people are just making crappy choices and we don't have any control over that. And that is part of the acceptance of what is in our control and what isn't. In resilience, there are multiple concepts to embrace. And one of them is the idea that we need a place in this world. We need to understand our authentic self. It can be about roots. It can be about where we wish to invest our energy. It is always best to invest it first in our personal journey before we begin thinking about who else we are investing our time and our energy in. Because until we're fully healed, we're building everything on a faulty foundation. And when we build things on a faulty foundation, they have a tendency to crumble under stress. And so that is part of the reason that you will manifest best from a place of having been healed. You will also manifest best from the concept that I embrace the idea that I'm a resilient being of light. I embrace the concept that even if things come and knock me down, it is an opportunity to heal my wounds thoroughly, to stand up and to walk forward. And it is contained in our perspective of how much have you grown, how much have you expanded, how much wisdom have you gained through the things that may or may not have happened in your life. And to keep in mind that you do not know what other people have faced. You know what you have faced, but you can assume that no matter what somebody's life looks like from an exterior perspective, that from an interior one, it has been filled with their own forms of battle. Some people can have all the money in the world, but a really, really disrupted and disjointed inner world that makes peace, happiness, and contentment almost a foreign concept. So the concept of belonging is finding where your particular perspective and viewpoint is best served. And that can be through pursuing spiritual teachings. Like I said, I like to do all forms in psychology, informed spirituality, because it helps us work in conjunction with that belonging part. The belonging part is that spirituality, and in fact, they've done studies that long-term meditation can cause different forms of dissociative disorder, simply because it can lead to ungrounded thinking, interacting with ungrounded realities, and going off into something called maladaptive daydreaming, which is something that nobody wants, but a lot of trauma survivors have experienced. If you were traumatized as a child, the chances that, daydreaming and fantasy were one of the things that helped get you through that are pretty high. And as an adult, it can be believing in false constructs. So what you want to do is have this very balanced approach to understanding that the unseen world is real, but so is the real world. So that things have to hold up to logical sense within the real world. And because I work with something that is unseen, it's like, well, how in the world can you believe that what you do works up to a stringent logical test? Because over and over again, it's proven to be true. I can be having meetings via Zoom, and I can tell people very deep, intricate details about how their inner world reacts to the world around them. And there's no way for me to be doing that unless there's something beyond this, unless there are gifts that do have to do with our intuition. But we want our intuition and psychic gifts to be a spoiler sheet for our entire lives, and that's not what it's there for. It's to inform your choices, and it is your choices that kind of construct your reality. So you want to find your point of belonging, whether it's a collective, whether it's a family, whether it's a spiritual belief, understanding that you may outgrow it, which is part of resilience as well. Resilience is understanding that things come and go, and that we should not value things simply by the concept that they are permanent, because unknown factors can come along and kind of disrupt it. And I'll use like an example that is, I think, pretty easy for people to understand. I'm an exceptionally protected person. I get good outcomes even if bad things happen to me. I have always felt very protected and guided. But I also know that they can only protect me within the scope of my own personal choices. And so I talk a lot about how much I like to hike. I had to give it up for close to a month and a half. And it was because I'm in Southern California and the conditions were so dry that it was actively dangerous to be in the places that I normally would hike. And I didn't realize that until I was out one day. And I will admit to being a slight rule breaker sometimes. I know you're all shocked, but I'm a bit of a rebel. Everybody needs to know what they need to conform to and what they need to rebel against to get their best outcomes. So I was hiking down a trail that I normally hike down. It's in Wildwood National Park, if anybody cares. And there was a sign that said this trail closed. Well, I looked around, I could see people up ahead of me on the trail. I was like, I don't know what this is doing here. There's nothing going on. I walked directly past it. did my whole hike, did my meditation, hiked through the woods, came back. As I was passing by it again, and it was still there as I was, heading to the parking lot, I kept wondering why in the world would it have been closed. And the wind was just kicking up there, and I realized I was in an area that was a valley, and that if anything had caught fire while I was in there, it would have been a wind tunnel and a firestorm. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was not right. And then so I switched to where I was hiking that was not in that condensed area where you'd be more likely to be cooked like you were living in a barbecue. Instead, I went to another area, and I kept having these multiple like unnerving things happen, including that when it doesn't rain very frequently, the ground soil is very loose and it's easy to fall. So I kept falling. So I was like, okay, I finally caught the hint. And then as things got worse and worse, and of course we had devastating fires in California, waiting for it to rain so that I could start hiking at my normal areas. I still went hiking. I just went in areas that were, you don't need the exhaustive details on this. Just trust me, I was still able to figure out how to hike. I just had to reassemble my toolkit for how I connect. And I got told through a series of cards I really do, they communicate through me very easily through my cards, about going back to Wildwood on something and hiking a different trail. And it was literally the name of the trail was being spelled out to me over and over again. And I knew where it was. And I went to hike it the other day. And it was a fun hike. I had a really good time. I didn't see anybody on most of it, which I like that. I like that. I'm not, because I feel very protected, I don't feel very frightened easily. And when we're talking about protection and the idea of fire, it's like, well, aren't you protected? Yes, but if I'm sticking myself in the middle of a fire zone, that has to take a lot of the energy that is available to me, the universal energy, just to keep my, significantly sometimes reckless butt safe. That I need to participate in my own protection by making good choices. And so I went and I did this hike, and it was the most uneven ground I've ever hiked on in my life. Now, I have a surgically reconstructed heel from a car accident many years ago, and I was never supposed to be able to fully rehab it. But I actually did. It's because I just didn't give up on it. I just kept working on it and working on it. And today, I have absolutely normal balance, which I didn't for a long time because I was weak on my right side, which is supposed to be my dominant side. So I hike over this incredibly uneven ground. I had a good time. I didn't even notice it. It's about a 5-mile hike. I'm heading back to my car, and for whatever reason, so many parks have a hill right before the parking lot, so that's where you can gauge how exhausted you really are as you're going, oh God, it's a hill right before the car, and I have like almost no gas in the tank. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. But as I was walking up the hill, I was like, my hips kind of hurt. I wonder why. The next day, I'm in absolute crushing amounts of pain from my hips. And it was like bad enough that I'm like taking down Advil and being like, well, thanks for telling me to go do that. And I kept, throughout the day, I was wondering, I'm absolutely positive that's what I was told to go do. I wonder if it's about, rebuilding balance strength, because going up and down those uneven rocks is actually calls upon your balance a great deal. And as I was pondering this, and by the way, it's fine the next day, it was just muscle soreness. It wasn't an injury. I realized my heel didn't hurt at all. It didn't hurt at all. And they sent me there to do something that would be challenging on one level, to illustrate that it's like, you're actually better and you don't think of yourself that way. Because I can lose track of the fact that I was told it was not possible to fully rehab that injury, but I did it because when they said not possible, I think they thought that everybody would give up before it became possible. It took me a really long time, and I really do mean 2 decades worth of work, to try and rehab that particular injury, but I did do it. And the soreness in my hips being so acute that it finally dawned on me, wait, that's the only part of me that hurts. And I have the surgical reconstruction is a plate and 6 screws, and I mean it's a massive piece of hardware in there, and it causes inflexibility. Exactly this thing that will be challenged if you're going up and down jagged rocks, which is what I was doing for about 2.5 hours. And so accepting that, yeah, they threw me into the path of an uncomfortable day to illustrate how well I was doing. Part of resilience is looking not at the challenge, but looking for what the information about yourself, what you're facing, and what you might need to improve contains. Whatever comes to you, it is trying to help you strengthen a reaction that you have, because trauma survivors are frequently very reactionary and it causes a chaotic energy. Learning how to heal that inner world through positive self-talk, which is also called, I believe, dialectical behavioral therapy. It's positive reinforcement, learning how to talk to yourself, not be your inner critic, but rather your inner cheerleader. It helps a lot. I've covered all of these things in self-love podcasts and things. So the first concept behind resilience is that nothing is being done to you unfairly, but rather that absolutely everything, if you look at it from a good perspective, will contain elements of how to improve and manifest more. So when we talk about resilience, and that's just the basic of it, is understanding that no matter what's happened to you, if you keep trying, you can bounce back. And when I talk about going up and down mountains and climbing over hills, that is not the only way to be resilient. It is, you can be an artist, and even though no one's ever bought your artwork, continuing to develop your skill and getting feedback on it. Not everybody comes in a body that hops up and down mountains easily. And like, I clearly had some challenges and some permanent injuries to doing just that. But part of my genetic line are, like, my grandfather was a Scottish coal miner. He was the toughest person I ever met in my entire life to this day. From on that side of the family, you practically have to kill us to get us to die, and I'm being literal. Like, there are very robust people on that particular side of my family. And now, so looking for your perspective will increase your resiliency. Is reminding yourself, and I talked about this in the Ego Death podcast that I did last week, is look for the perspective that will allow you to glimpse the information, because they're always interacting with you. Your guides are always trying to bring you what you need to do better. And it does involve being able to embrace the point of this journey is not whether I am right or wrong. Release that as a measure of your worth. If you have been wrong about something, it doesn't mean that it invalidates your entire perspective, invalidates your entire journey. It's just that being able to accept when we may be wrong about something is one of the things that allows us to grow and to change. And being ever resilient is the same thing as being very youthful. It gives you a very youthful energy. So make change your friend, invite it in, because that is the energy of transformation, and that is part of resilience as well. Acceptance, of course, comes into what I was talking about with that hiking story, is I had to accept that I probably would not be burned to actual death, but it could get actually hairy and scary, and it might involve things like, a swift recovery from a burn graft if I was not careful. That I need to participate in this. Knowing that I am a protected person doesn't mean that I need to be cosseted or swaddled. What it means is that, hey, if you hang it out there, chances are good it's not going to be too bad. But there will be consequences of your actions, because that is how we learn. Consequences are not punishments. They are the direct reaction of our actions. And that, when we come into the law of attraction and manifestation, is something that we deeply need to understand, because part of resilience is hope. If something hasn't come to you yet that you have been trying to manifest, examine what you are trying to manifest. If you want to be a superstar of the silver screen, please remember that is very few people's fate. So ask instead to be recognized and successful in your chosen field. Ask for happiness and contentment. Because actually, if you look at fame, it's mostly a prison for the people who are involved in it. It's a pretty prison, but it's a prison. They don't have the freedom of movement that anonymity grants so many of us. Trying not to envy is another thing. Is perspective will teach us that when we look at somebody and says they have something that I want, then we can also say, but it comes with something I wouldn't. As for instance, if you envy somebody their looks or their vitality or their stuff, with the idea of stuff comes the fear of risk and of losing it, because stuff can be lost. Material things can come and go. They do. In the material world, material things come and go. If you are envying somebody their looks, please remember that can be a very limiting and reductive way to be viewed. That a long time ago, what is her name? I think it's Denise Richards or something. She was involved with Charlie Sheen at one point. Played an astrophysicist or a neuroscientist in a movie that I did not watch. I just remember reading the review, and people were complaining that she was utterly unbelievable as this neuroscientist or physicist because of the way she looked. And please remember that there is a backswing to every pendulum. Everything that you see on the upside has its own downside. And so that if your manifestations have not come in to be as you're hoping them to be, readjust what you're asking for to have a broader guideline, which is part of resilience as well. Resiliency and the ability to manifest are first cousins, because sometimes we want things that there are too many things in the way of. As in the example of somebody who just wants to be a superstar. It's like, well, that's like a handful of people's fate. Is there another form of fulfillment? And that is the other thing that you want to think about when you are trying to manifest, is quit making it so much about what you think you want. Because what happens sometimes when we get what we want and we haven't healed our stuff is we discovered that was not the problem all along. Turns out I'm just, I need to heal my inner world. And then you stop wanting what you have and you just go on to want something else. And it's always something you're chasing. That's the chasing mindset. If you are in flow, which is part of being resilient, understanding that absolutely everything that comes to you, even if it is a difficulty, even if it slows things down, is trying to bring you the lessons of how to get what you want, what the things that you're striving for. And the concept of want, meaning a lack thing, how to get what will help you feel fulfilled and abundant. Watch your language around what you're asking for. Ask for fulfillment, prosperity, and abundance. And please remember, at the root of the idea of prospering is growth, and that growth can be very uncomfortable. So if you've been caught in a long period of nothing is working out for me, instead, it feels like I slammed my head into a brick wall, into a brick wall, into a brick wall. It's like, well, maybe the lesson's trying to tell you, recognize brick walls before you slam your head into them. Because if they involve other people or unattainable goals, then it is best to switch your energy into what is best for me. So asking your guides to help you manifest an abundant and fulfilling life is the thing that will most likely guarantee your happiness. And I do have some notes on this because there's an article in Psychology Today about resiliency if you want to go and read it. This is a very current topic. We are talking about resiliency and building it and how it is the thing that will allow you to heal from absolutely anything if you embrace the idea that I am resilient, I am ever growing. Something may knock me down and I may even have to rest down there for a little while before I have the strength to get up, but I will always get up. And that is the thing that is manifestation. Manifestation of strength and growth is another form of abundance and strength. It's the stronger you are, the more willpower you have, you will have more blocking energies because everything exists in a balanced state and there's an opposite energy to you. So you have to find the path of least resistance. Resilience is the concept that you are not a resistant person, but that you will bend and flow with what is brought to you to get the best possible outcomes that you can possibly achieve. And here we have a couple of things on the being a hopeful person, which boy, there was a tire screech when I was doing the research on, it's like hope. We live in a very challenging time in which we appear to be repeating a very difficult cycle of history. There's still hope. There's still hope. We could get a different outcome. We are different people. But the idea of hope, if you can't find it, if you can't look around the world and say, I'm very hopeful for our outcomes, we really seem to be learning our lessons. What you can sub in for hope is curiosity. If you are having trouble investing hope in this world, find interest instead. Passions, interests, and pursuits will give you hope. I talked to a client not that long ago who's suffering from a very severe depression. Sincerely, looking in the cards, there was a depression. I'm not giving away any identifying details. I never do, but I will bring up things in that I find in readings, because when I find the way to help somebody with something, I try to share it in as many ways as I can. And this person who was suffering from severe depression didn't have any hobbies. When I asked them, well, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? Didn't have any. Tried to set them up with a bunch of different things that might spark some interest. But that is the thing, if you are really struggling with hopelessness, look for your curiosity. It can be in learning new things. It can be in watching new shows. If you're having a focus problem, because depression is a thief of the ability to focus, then you want to find short form periods of focus, which can be short stories. TikTok can be a miracle for that because everything is in under a 10-minute format. Those things are all over YouTube. They're all over different forms of social media as well. But to follow your curiosity, Always follow your curiosity, and to remember that we really do exist best in a state of balance, and that our natural balance comes also from interacting with the natural world. If anybody's watching this, I apologize that I look vaguely like an alarmed poodle right now, because I take a walk or some form of exercise. I usually hike. I usually take some form of like about an hour's worth of exercise before I work. It gets me in flow. And again, my body can do that, but there are other ways to be in flow if your body can't, because it's not about worth. Listen to music, listen to meditation music, sit and do adult coloring. There are many apps that have those paint by numbers things that taps into your creativity. Get yourself into a form of flow. It does not have to be the, like, everything I mentioned is supposed to be like, I lift weights, I do this. You don't have to do any of that. What you have to do is reach for a flowing and expansive energy. And whenever I say you have to do anything, you never have to do anything. But if you want better results, this is one of the ways to do it. And many people are missing the hopeful component of the idea of resilience, because they look around the world and go, oh my Lord. It's a little bit hard to be hopeful sometimes. Disconnect from the news regularly. Give yourself permission to only read the headlines. If you do a deep dive on this stuff, and you'll know when it's time for, it's like, no, I need to participate in that. That's the level of, like, that's the thing that will bestir me to action. Even the Quakers, like, have gotten into the brawl, which, when I talk about my weird childhood, the one really, really positive thing was I went to Quaker farm camp. There apparently was only ever one. It closed a couple of years ago. And being in touch with my emotions was something that I really had to heal. A client told me, a client who was a Quaker came to me after hearing me on a podcast talk about going to Quaker farm camp. And they told me, Ralph and Marie are closing it. It's been open for this amount of time. And I kept a completely straight face and was like, oh yeah, thank you for telling me. I got off of that and I went and I cried for about 2.5 hours, because it was my concept of home. And understanding that things will come and go, and that part is now gone and nobody else can ever interact with that, but that it was there for a long time. And that was probably my saving grace in this world. Every abused child needs one really positive relationship. And even though it was only for a very brief period of my life, like 5 years out of my life, and my grandmother saved like a miser to send me there so she could get rid of me, I don't blame her for that. She didn't want to raise me. She didn't want to be in charge of me. And like, that's a legitimate and valid thing that I don't really hold anything against her for. It was hard for me because, I was treated as a burden, and that was the way I learned to approach myself. But at this particular camp, they taught all of the things that Quakers believe. And I happen to be in alignment with many of the things the Quakers believe. I'm not a practicing Quaker. I'm not practicing anything other than a celestial and angelic magic practitioner. Technically, I'm a high priestess in that. And what do I say technically? You have to undergo like a 5-year period that is, most people won't want to do it because it involves a very simple life. It involves it's not quite a vow of poverty, but it is that level of like, I strip away everything I don't need in my life to get in better touch with my magical connection, my power, my abilities. And then it does end and you go forward again. And the thing to remember with hope is that humor is one of the easiest ways to fuel it. And that's why giving up the idea that any of this is about whether or not you're right or wrong, or whether or not you found the right answers, or whether or not I say 2 things that make sense to you and 8 that don't, and you're like, you can take those 2 things and go on your merry way. Have hope in the idea that if I'm open to it, the answers will come to me. And then have the ability to laugh at some of the things that you got wrong in the past. There's nothing that will crack me up more than sitting around and thinking about all of the red flags that I used to absolutely ignore in other people because I'd never been around healthy people. And so as I healed, it's a lot harder for anybody throwing off red flags to spend any time with me. And I look at the person that I was almost as like, well, you were kind of raised by begrudging wolves. So of course you didn't have great instincts on who belonged in your life and who didn't. But I do find it a little bit funny that I'm almost like an IKEA bookshelf assembling myself over time, trying to be like, am I missing the screw or the plank? Like, I'm always trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together over that which is broken. But so is everybody. We have a shared experience in that. And if you can start to view it like that, the difficulties that are put in your path are telling you, you have a vulnerability here. You have a vulnerability here. Like I said, I got sent on a hike that I genuinely did enjoy, except that yesterday was a colorful experience just getting out of bed in the morning because I was making involuntary sounds of pain. It was like, oh my God, this really hurts. And that is not even close to the longest hike I've ever done. So I was really caught off guard by it, but it was the biggest challenge to my balance. And I am technically not supposed to be able to have done that without resulting pain on my reconstructed side. And I didn't. I had even side pain that had to do with muscle stabilization around balance. And so the way that my guides were illustrating to me is like, no, you have your entire balance back. Your equilibrium is externally restored, and you've restored your internal equilibrium. It did not come without like, ow, ow. And why? Get my attention on it. That was literally, they didn't like go to that as their first answer. They really didn't. I had not noticed. I was paying zero attention because we take for granted the things we can do. I was paying zero attention to the fact that like I routinely like am going up and down sets of rocks and jumping all over the place and doing some trail running and all kinds of things that even as little as like 10 years ago, I would not have been able to do because of resulting pain in a permanent injury. But that permanent injury was healed because I never gave up on it. And that's the other thing with resilience. Resilience will tell you I can find value in whatever experience I'm having. I do not judge the experience I'm having as to whether or not I deserve to have this happening, I deserve to have that happening. It's not the things that are brought to us when we are still unhealed that are trying to help us understand our own vulnerabilities so that we can be in a safe and protected energy. Because when I talk about being protected, anybody can be protected if they connect. The reason I was a little bit more protected than other people is I had nobody protecting me as a child. Nobody. And hideous things happened to me and around me. And I don't want to be triggering, so I'm not going to go too deeply into them. But if it's not because I'm like a special unicorn of a human that I got all this protection, it's that there was nobody else. There was nobody else. And so it formed as something that I pursued even as a child, understanding that there was something else there. And as I've discussed in the past, that when the house was on fire when I was 12, that particular force actually went out of its way to wake me up and tell me that the house is on fire and I needed to get up. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't hear voices. I'm not seeing anything. I'm very connected and I know what I need to know when I need to know it. And when I'm reading for people, I do like have like a back and forth with their guides. And sometimes I'll encounter guides that it's like, I don't even know how to talk to these folks. Your guides are going to be right for you as well. It doesn't mean I don't figure it out. It's just that every now and then it'll be like, this is from a different collective because we all have different collectives. Finding your place in this world is part of belonging, which is part of resilience. But that doesn't mean you have to have family or friends, or technically I kind of qualify as an orphan because I'm completely disconnected from my family. And I was from the time I was very small, like very, very small. So I technically have all of the psychological damage that an orphan would, including a very damaged attachment style. Understanding that that was a result of damage versus a result of how I'm made, like it's me innately, it's my authentic self, really helped. And so my sense of belonging will come with my purpose, with what I value in my own life, because I am not going to have a family. I mean, I have a son. He is a full-grown man, though, and so like he has his own life. As is the goal of raising children, is to be able to raise people who can conduct their own lives. So at this particular stage in my life, I'm not going to like suddenly have aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters. I'm not going to. I have a half brother. He is unfortunately gravely ill. And so he will no longer be in this world for that much longer, although I don't know when that might occur. Which is funny, sometimes I can actually predict death at a very, very detailed level for other people, but I'm always a little blinded to my stuff. And I understand why. When I'm given information, I try to live my life to outcomes because I have an anxiety disorder. And instead, I needed to heal my anxiety. And when I heal my anxiety, I was less fussed about what's happening. It's like, it'll be fine. I'll figure it out. I'll make good things happen because I always manage to, so I'll be able to. But having a sense of humor and finding hope and feeling that the idea of acceptance that whatever has happened in my life has not, even if it's been horrifically painful, because I can sound a little bit like dismissive of that, but many of the things I healed from were insanely painful, including that need to have, like, my right heel reconstructed. That hurt like a son of a you-know-what. It really, 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 really hurt. It hurt for many years. I did not take a step that didn't hurt at least a little bit for 15 years. It hurt. But it also taught me to value what my body can do and how healthy and resilient it is. Everything that has been piled upon you, if you are overcoming it or attempting to, and you can get very lost in the dark sometimes, so reaching out for help can really help. That sense of belonging that I have to my purpose and to what I do doesn't have to be yours. You may be very connected to your family. You may be very connected to a spiritual community. Find your sense of belonging as your first point of how do I develop resiliency. And understand that belonging may be a temporary state, like you go to a 4-year university, then you graduate and go on your way. Spirituality works a little bit like that as well. Resiliency, the ability to bounce back, allows you to have the energy that you need to form the picture of a world that will be enduring for you to inhabit in your most fulfilled and abundant energy. And that is how the law of attraction works best. And sometimes you'll see people talking about the law of attraction. It just works for them. It's wonderful that they have so little trauma to heal. But sometimes it is flash and thunder manifestation, which means it'll come into reality and then it will be lost. And I had a lot of that in my own life, manifesting incredible houses and a couple of other things but it was built on the faulty foundation of not being willing to face who my ex-partner was as a person. I did not want some of the things that were true about him and increasingly obviously true to be true. And so I tried to practice denial. And so that's why things got so pitched as like, they're like, you've got to see this, you've got to see this. Please remember that part of our path is that the lessons that we need to confront, the truth that we need to confront will be brought to us, and sometimes it's painful. And it doesn't mean you brought this on yourself, but I can realistically see the ways in which I contributed to a lot of my own difficulties, and that's the humor and the humility that also goes hand in hand with resilience, is having a sense of humor about yourself. I have a lot of willpower. I have a lot of willpower. If I talk about healing what was supposed to be an unhealable injury, it is because I just did not give up on it. But that willpower can turn towards stubbornness and denial. Remember, stubbornness is your willpower that took a wrong turn into self-destructive habits. That's what stubbornness is. Being stubborn is not in any way a virtue. It means that you are clinging to something despite all other evidence. Listen to other people as well who mean you well, and be able to spot the ones that don't. People who undermine you consistently are not meant to be in your life. But you can learn how to protect yourself when you are confronted by people you need to protect yourself from. It will help you learn how to extend your energy appropriately. And that is another part of resilience. So resilience is the biggest key to personal happiness. And resilience is something that you cultivate first through your perspective, through your acceptance, through your pursuit of hope, and then also just the idea of, I'm going to quit looking at my life as to whether I was right or I was wrong, whether I made the right choices or the wrong choices. What can I learn from the choices that I made and the outcomes and the consequences that might have resulted? If you want to manifest, be prepared to alter yourself to have a better outcome. If you've always had difficult relationships, then remember, is he your type or is he your pattern? He's your pattern. People go back to the same source over and over again, the same personality type, expecting a different result. And it's like the answer is change what you value in your own life so that you stop looking to another external source for confidence and empowerment. Find it within. And one of the first steps in empowerment is accepting I have things to learn and change is my friend. Even if it means changing how I react to things, how I feel about things, and how I view things. Cultivate resilience and you will feel more spiritually connected. For people who are always like, I can't hear my guides, I can't hear my guides, I try. Your guides are trying so hard to get to you. They're trying so hard to get to you. They could be trying right now with the things that are coming out of my mouth. Your guides will try in so many different shapes and forms. And I'll share one last story of, for a long time, your spirit guides change at different points of your life as you evolve into different areas. And we will have new ones come in. as we are in a different stage of our life. For a stage in my life, I felt sorry for any reader who ever looked into my cards, because they would all comment on how impossible my guides were and how like they wouldn't budge on anything. And that it was like facing a bunch of warriors and Marines and soldiers. And it's like, well, that's probably exactly what I have, because I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the energy often associated with, different forms of battle-related trauma. Now, I was never a soldier, and I'm not going to do that stolen valor thing. No, not at all. My father, actually, part of what was wrong with him was he was a veteran, and he had multiple horrific things happen that contributed to the way that he acted. And so that's the generational trauma I experienced. So that's how it's part of my energy. Generational trauma and generational curses are the same thing. Generational curses are an energy that is visited upon a family that carries forward and carried forward and carried forward. That's generational trauma. Is understanding that underneath your trauma is your authentic self. And I've done so much work on helping people heal. And I have trauma fatigue at this point. I'm in a pretty healed state, and I've left behind all the information that anybody could ever need to go towards it. And I help people on a one-on-one basis with it all the time still in the work that I do. But this is about how to start expanding, because when you're resilient, you bounce back. When you bounce back, you bounce higher. When you bounce higher, you are more powerful. Resilience and personal power are best friends. They are twin souls. They are the things that need one another, because literally every successful person you have ever looked at has had something go wrong for them that they had to simply power through. I think I used Taylor Swift as an example earlier about, she's had multiple things. Like, yes, she's the most famous woman in the world currently, I believe. She's certainly known across the globe, but she's had her own, judgments against her, her personal life. She became famous very young, and there was a lot of intrusive activity in her life, and she's handled it all with tremendous aplomb. But you can tell that she hasn't been without challenges, including there is a fairly famous footage of one of her security team having to tackle a man who was leaping up on stage and actually caught her ankle. And the guide took him out in a flying tackle. The guard took him out in a flying tackle. And she very lightly tripped and then went skipping on her way as she continued her show. But that's the type of stuff that comes with, there is always an equal and opposite energy to something that you have to be able to bounce back from. So that is the other thing that you need to understand with resilience, is that if you are trying to manifest success, then you are going to have to come to a point where you can handle the stress and the challenge that comes with it, as in that extreme example of, she has to live her merry life knowing that in any turn there could be a crazy person who has formed a really unhealthy parasocial relationship with what they believe she stands for. And to them it's perfectly real, and she's in real danger from that person. That's the backswing on that beautiful pendulum. Very little privacy, constant public judgment. God forbid she ever gained 5 pounds, I'm sure the news would be all over it. Everything has a backswing with it. And when we cultivate resiliency, what we are doing is cultivating the ability to not notice that backswing. And I will give you a closing example on what that looks like. When I first started this, the fact that there were scammers all over the place, and they're inventive, and it's not just the people who text you with like, hey, do you want, Chinese food for dinner? Which I had one the other night where it was, hey, Anna, do you want Korean food? And I was like, I don't know, Anna's delete. I do not answer any of those, because most of them are phishing schemes. The other thing I constantly get are faux invoices through PayPal, and I just turn them over to the phishing department. There are, honestly, in modern life, we withstand constant assaults on our security and our stability. And it's become such a normal thing that it doesn't even cause a ripple. And that's what resilience does. When I had 4, I think, yesterday, and I know that there will be more of like people trying to, here's another scheme that I face all the time, people who go out to your website and they analyze your search engine optimization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they will undermine you in emails talking about how you should be more successful and you've got all these errors, but if you give me this money, I will fix it. And I do just fine, thanks. Like, could I be optimized? Sure, but currently that's not a place I'm going to invest any money in because I'm concentrating on the things I'm concentrating on. But every single week, I will receive them from a variety of different sources. And they start out with trying to make you feel like you're failing. And I know I'm not failing, but I have to be able to have that attitude all the time. And that's what resilience does for you. There will be challenges always, and they will come from that opposite energy. And the more you have, the more likely you are to have people who may be jealous of what you have and willing to attack you. And so resilience, and I don't mean physically in the way I talked about Taylor Swift. I mean comment sections coming at you, trying to exploit you, trying to talk bad about you, whatever it might be. And you have to be able to just let it go. Resilience allows you to let things go appropriately and focus on what is actually important to you. Resilience, we talked about patience being the key to power. And patience has nothing to do with waiting. It has to do with being peaceful in the day-to-day so you enjoy the actual life that you're living, even as you're trying to build towards what you want. But resilience is after you've achieved patience, then you build your resilience. And your resilience, when you have it, when you can let the things go that can come at you and still continue on your life, not having it impact how you feel about the path that you're walking on. Because what I'm talking about with all the scammers coming from multiple directions is I could feel like I'm constantly under attack, or I could laugh at the fact that it's like, man, y'all keep trying, don't you? And I choose to laugh at the fact that it's like every single day there's, part of hustle's culture is scam culture. And I don't hold anything against those people. I don't know what their stories are. I don't know how much they're struggling to eat or have a roof over their head. It's not about, you're a bad person, you're trying to scam me. It's like, I'm sorry you're so desperate that you're trying to scam people. But I'm not easy to scam. And it doesn't get to me. And that is also resilience. And so if you really want to understand why resilience is such a key, it is the element of doubt is taken out of the equation, which the law of attraction, which I've talked so much about, having that one flaw. Don't think negative thoughts. Listen, don't shut parts of yourself down. Denial is a repressive and a limiting and a rigid structure. Allow yourself to sometimes be afraid, but talk yourself through it, self-soothe yourself through it, talk yourself up, and the good self-loving talk that can really help us is don't shun your shadow side. Take care of it. And resilience will try, and anything that tries to bat you over into that dark side, into the old ways of living, into the old ways of doing things, resilience is the thing that bounces you back onto your path and into the energy. Oh, I just had something happen that is key to mentioning it. Resilience and gratitude. That the card was gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most abundant energies that there is. And it is not just going through your life, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that. If you don't like where you're living, admit that you don't like where you're living, but find what you are grateful for about where you're living, whether it's a nice view or a comfortable bed or whatever it is. But here's the easiest way to inhabit an attitude of gratitude, which leads to abundance and does aid the law of attraction and manifestation. Thank people. Thank your servers. Thank anybody that you interact with in a customer service, even if you're not getting what you want. Thank them for their help. Tell them, I appreciate you. Living in an attitude of appreciation will also aid your resilience. And with your resilience, when you bounce back, you will bounce back stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And that is one of the things that will help you manifest. All right, so that was the power of resilience in our spiritual and our manifestation journeys, or whatever I'm going to end up calling it. I hardly ever know until I'm actually uploading it. Just one final word on that is give yourself a moment every day to just concentrate on what is good in that moment. And you will already be inhabiting the idea of, no matter what's going on in my life, I found the positive energy bounce back that I need to keep going. And if you cannot find hope, then find curiosity. And it can be in darker things. It can be like, okay, I couldn't find anything else, but okay, I'll watch true crime documentaries. Do that. Interest eventually heals. Enthusiasm and interest are very related concepts. So if you cannot find your hope, find something that intrigues you. Find a passion, and it doesn't have to pass anybody else's scrutiny. It can be as weird or as strange or as like, try not to have it be too related to darker things. But if it keeps you going, that is what resilience really is. It will keep you going, and you will not give up before such time as you have repoured your firm foundation from which you can build anything. And that is what resilience does. It means that when something goes, you say goodbye. You weren't meant to be here any longer. What's the next thing? What's coming? Because I believe something good is coming. Cultivate these concepts, and your life will begin to feel better immediately. And when you are happy, you have a tendency to manifest more as well. This has been Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Thank you for joining me. If you want to find me, you can find me at therisingmoon.com exclusively. That's the only way to book me. If I sound like a broken record on it, sometimes I do actually get tired of saying the same things over and over again. I have a Patreon. It's linked in the episode notes and in the description box down below. And I also have a YouTube channel where the video versions of this go up, where I look like a somewhat startled French poodle today because my hair gets frizzy in the rain. That is Chromecast at the Rising Moon, with At the Rising Moon being all one word on YouTube. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you guys next time.